Sir, the whistleblowers bill is another major step in this direction. It will enable people to bring to the notice of the public wrongdoings being committed by the public servants. The Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill, which has been introduced in Parliament, is a major step to make the functioning of the judiciary more accountable and more transparent. As the Honorable President has specifically mentioned women in her address, I would like to draw attention towards the gender budget statement, which does not actually give specific data about women. In the gender budget statements of previous years, less allocations of funds were made for women specific programs. That is extremely unfair. I hope that this year in the gender budget, every ministry would increase their allocations for women. More allocation of funds should be made to the states to build infrastructure, to implement the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act. Similarly, funds should be allocated to constitute a high-level committee to conduct a review of self-help groups, their policies and programs. A national task force should be set up for relief and rehabilitation of women in riot-hit or terrorism-hit areas. The issue is misuse of discretionary powers by those in authority, and the worrying thing is that the president of a national opposition party says that it may be morally wrong, but it is not legally wrong. And this attitude shows their double standard. Today, India stands at the crossroads of nation building because of our demographic, trade, currents, opportunities thrown up by decline of economies in the West, and the next 15-20 years, we can hope that India can become a history will not forgive us, and future generations will criticize us for our failures. Sir, I am deeply disappointed with the address prepared by this government and delivered by President. I have serious doubts about the propriety as also the integrity of this government. There seems to be a trust deficit between the party in power and the government in power. Why was the head of the government remained silent for 3 years when this was happening right under his nose? All you have to do is to distance yourself from the appointment of the gentleman as the minister. You distance yourself from the policy formulation. You distance yourself from the implementation of that policy and all the unfortunate things that took place along with it, and then ultimately say that he was not such a big culprit. This was a complete abandonment of not only the principle of collective leadership, it was also an abandonment of collective responsibility. It was an abandonment of leadership itself, where the Prime Minister tries to distance himself from the rot that has sat in the government itself. He is leading one of the most dishonest governments in the history. Food inflation is skyrocketing. Inflation is skyrocketing, and all we have is just some subtle statements from the government that by another 6 months or another 5 years, the inflation figures will moderate themselves. Your inflation figures for the last 3 years, I am talking of the wholesale price index, hovers around the double figures. At times, it marginally comes down. The consumer price index is even higher. Your food price index is as high as 17 to 18% at times. Post liberalization, India has success stories. The areas like telecom and highways have great success, but we find that we have outsourced it in those hands where integrity quotient was lacking. These are two sectors which have preciously got discredited the most, notwithstanding their success. The inflation affects the common man. You can't control it, and you are speaking of this great India story. You are, after year, you told the rest of the world that come and invest in India. Investment, if we make India into an attractive destination, has its own advantages. It will generate economic activity and jobs. You will have more money for infrastructure creation. But if India to attract on it, for expanding our international trade, you need wide quality ports. Our infrastructure creation is not at the pace at which it ought to be. Our inflation is disproportionately high. We all welcome social sector spending. Our corruption index is very high. All of us would be of one view in protecting our environment. Every time when the inflation is high, we keep hiking our interest rates as the only possible solution to such an extent that doing business in India will become non-competitive if we don't moderate them. 80 की स्पीड है और कॉमन वर्ड के 2D पार्ट का बोला गया है ये आपको 9 नंबर 790 के आसपास वर्ड है 90 प्लस वर्ड है 790 प्लस कॉमन वर्ड के 2D पार्ट का 9 नंबर है और 80 की स्पीड है 790 प्लस वर्ड है. ठीक है, आप में से जो अच्छी लिखे ठीक है, नहीं तो आप उधर बैठेंगे मैं